All right, so now this is gonna we're gonna talk a little bit about what was going on in England at the time, and in terms of the Protestant Reformation. Remember, the first Europeans. We talked a little bit about the Vikings, but the first Europeans to settle in what would become the 13 colonies were from England, and one of the reasons was because of religious persecution, among others, among other reasons. Now, we could get into a whole lot of detail about this. This is pretty interesting. But Henry the Eighth, all right, Henry the Eighth. Actually, that's my first name is Henry. Um, but my mother always called me Lane. For I don't know why she just liked Lane better. I don't mind Henry, but some people find it funny. But anyway, Henry the Eighth was the king of England, and he wanted a divorce from Catherine of Aragon. Okay, and he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. One of the reasons is because Catherine failed, and this is a very sexist way to put it, to produce a male heir to the throne. Now, of course, that's what they used to say back then. It's not like it was her fault. It's just what was happening. And so he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. The problem was, and this is very important, and it just kind of shows you how politics play in all this. Catherine of Aragon was the aunt of Charles V, who was the king of Spain, and also he was Charles I, the Holy Roman Emperor. We don't have to get into all of that, but basically he controlled, when he was the king of Spain, and he also controlled that whole area, what I was saying, talking about earlier, that became Germany, which was the Holy Roman Empire. The thing is remember, when all of this is going on in the 1500s, Europe is embroiled in these civil wars, and you have Protestantism and the Catholics and all of that. And King Charles V of Spain, all right, was viewed by the Pope as a protector. And he did, in other words, the Pope did not want to upset the King of Spain, Charles here, who was again the nephew of Catherine of Aragon. And so King Henry here, he broke away from the church and formed the Anglican Church, where he was the head of the church. And that's why we have the Anglican Church in the United States. It's called the Episcopal Church. And it was very close to Catholicism, especially back then. I mean, it's basically the same. In fact, it was called Catholic without the Pope. Um, you can find priests, Catholic priests, that are married. And oftentimes what happens is they became priests in the Anglican Church, and then they converted to Catholicism, and they could stay married. So that's kind of interesting. In fact, I think there was one in Lake Charles. Always, some students told me about him before, so you may know who I'm talking about. Now, Elizabeth the First, all right, became the monarch of England, and no wife of Henry VIII ever produced a male heir. But Elizabeth the First was the daughter of Anne Boleyn and Henry. And like I said, you can really get into um, the soap opera of it all, and it's actually pretty interesting. We're not going to get that uh, much into it. There were brief reigns of Edward the Sixth. There was also a reign by Bloody Mary, 1553 to 1558. But Elizabeth ascended the throne, and she, I guess, one of the most important things to remember about during her reign, and among other things, but what we'll focus on, it was that during her reign that she waged a cold war against Spain. Now, what you have to understand is that Spain at this time was the world power, but and they controlled and much of what would they considered the New World. However, in 1558, because Elizabeth was, really, she had these guys like Sir Francis Drake and these other people that go around and basically stop these Spanish ships that were bringing gold back from the New World, and they would take the gold. That's pretty much what we would call piracy. Um, the Spanish got tired of that, and so there was a major sea battle, all right, in which the Spanish had about 130 ships that set sail for England. And again, this is in 15. Well, I made a mistake here. It should not be 1558. This is very important. I'm glad I noticed that. It should be 1588. Very important. That's actually probably the one date that you'll remember just because I messed up here. So actually that's kind of good. 1588. All right. 1588. The myth is that the Spanish Armada was defeated because the English ships were faster, more maneuverable, better armed, and better led. But this is only partly true. I mean, the British did have swifter ships, but overall, they weren't. That's really not why they won. At that time, when there was battles at sea, they would have these big, large ships, and they would get real close to each other, and they would drop essentially what was a drawbridge, and they would run across, and they would fight each other with swords and all of that. Um, the the British ships, or the English ships, I should say, at this time, were much more faster, more maneuverable. But that's really not why they won. They were a little bit ahead of their time, but they weren't quite there yet. All right. Basically, what happened was, without ever really engaging with the English a whole lot, there was a storm that came and pretty much wiped the Spanish ship out. I mean, there were some other things that occurred, but that's pretty much what happened. And so the victory of the Spanish Armada was really crucial. And this is what I want you to remember. I mean, this is not a military history or strategy class. We could get into a whole lot of detail about that. But this is what I want you to remember. You've probably heard of the defeat of the Spanish Armada. And that's probably something that you've always known about. But the real reason, I mean, the reason that it's pretty famous and the reason that it's so important is, again, because this is a kind of a watershed date in history. The world would never be the same. All right, number one, we see the beginning of the decline of Spain, and we see the beginning of the ascendancy of England. I mean, we're speaking English right now, and many of you may be of English descent, West African descent, French descent, but we're all speaking English. Okay, so this is, the Spanish, like I said, controlled most of the New World, but this allowed, all right, the British, okay, to start claiming areas in North America that had previously been claimed by Spain, because without the Spanish Armada, because it was their navy was not the entire navy, destroyed, but a big part of their navy was destroyed. The Spanish could not defend, all right, the eastern seaboard of North America. And so this allowed later on the English to claim that area. And so that's why the defeat of the Spanish Armada was very important. Okay? So what we have right now is England, and there's going to be a lot of things that go on in England. Again, this I guess that's why I put 1558, is because that's when she came to power. But the defeat of the Spanish Armada occurred in 1588. And during the 1600s, all kinds of crazy stuff was going on in England, all right, to make people want to cross the Atlantic Ocean, which back then it's not like it is today, where you can just fly and you can be in Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris in 8 hours or something. Okay, if you're flying out of Houston, maybe a little bit longer, 9 hours. This was, a lot of people died at sea, and then once they got here, it wasn't easy. So things had to be really bad in England for people to want to go and go on that great adventure. And that's something that we'll probably talk about a little bit later on. But what I want you to do is to kind of master some of this material, okay? I want you to master everything that I talked about concerning the Protestant Reformation. It's all very important. And if you have any questions, make sure that you let me know. Okay?